You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking with David Shenk, who is the award-winning and national best-selling author of 6 books, including Data Smog, which was noted to be indispensable by the New York Times, The Forgetting, which many of you may have seen inspired an Emmy Award-winning PBS documentary, and he wrote The Immortal Game, which is about chess, one of the top topics on this radio show, and his new book is called The Genius in All of Us. So, David, I want to thank you for that title because it makes me feel good about myself if I've got some genius in me, too. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Most people consider that title a burden. It's like, oh, no, now I have to find the genius inside me?
I think, well, let's see. Tell me something. You talk about various talents. The talents in singing or playing instruments or chess or writing. Is this something that people are gifted with from birth, or is it in our genes?
No, this is a key insight that actually has come from my 2 recent books, the book about chess, The Immortal Game, and also this new book, The Genius in All of Us, which is that if you look at the science now, and you don't have to look at just one area of science, you can look at how genes work, you can look at what intelligence actually turns out to be, you can look at the study called expertise studies, which actually studies a bunch of psychologists studying how people get really good at stuff. It all is actually pointing in the same direction now, which is that talent and intelligence are not static things that you're born with. You're not born with a certain amount of musical talent or athletic talent or intelligence or certain kinds of intelligence. All these things are processes. They're a process which gets developed over time. Now, that's not to say people are going to hear that, and because we have a black and white way of talking about genes, people are going to hear me think that I'm saying that genes don't matter and that we all have exactly the same potential. And I'm not saying that at all. There's a way to understand how genes actually do influence us, get turned on and off by our lifestyle, and how different genes actually do have an impact. But at the same time, and how we actually are always going to have different potentials from one another, because obviously we're different people with different genes and different environments. But at the same time, what is that potential? We don't actually really know from our early experience in life. You don't run into a certain limit of ability on the soccer field or with a musical instrument in your hand or with a chessboard in front of you and know whether you are good or bad at that thing, whether you are genetically gifted, because that whole concept turns out to be a false one. It's really whether you can tap into a process that will improve you in a particular skill, and whether you stay with that process and whether you develop it in the smartest possible way.
But what about the people who, at a very young age, Mozart, right? When he was just a few years old, was already composing fabulously. Now, you could say he practiced a lot, and it's true his father was quite a music teacher as well. But he's different from how I was at that age.
Right. Well, certainly we all have different lives and we all have different circumstances, and that includes different genes. But what's really interesting is if you look very closely at the great achievers of our time, Mozart included, and actually Mozart is one of the people I spent a lot of time with looking at for my most recent book. What you see is the process come through. So in the case of Mozart, part of it is myth. What we've done is we've taken everything we know about Mozart, and we've kind of, since we know he turned out to be this extraordinary composer, obviously one of the great composers of all time, and we know that he was also very musical early on, we've kind of compacted it into this giant myth that at 3 years old, Mozart was this God-given musical genius who picked up a violin, started playing perfectly, picked up a piano, not picked up, but sat down at the piano, started playing perfectly, picked up a pen and started composing these absolutely gorgeous, extraordinary works. And the truth, of course, is much, much more interesting and much, much more complicated. And I don't want to spend all my time, but just let me sum it up by saying, if you look at Mozart's life from the very, very beginning, there are actual reasons why he took an interest in music. And there's an actual process of him going from very, very ordinary, very, very incapable of doing any of these things, to developing a passion and an interest for it and getting better and better and better, both at the instruments and at the composing.
Okay, That is a good answer to that. David, let me ask you a question. You've written successfully on many different and diverse topics, from Alzheimer's to chess. How do you get from one to the next?
Well, this is my blessed life. I knew in high school and in college that I wanted to be not only that I wanted to be a writer, but that I wanted to be a nonfiction writer, which meant basically just kind of asking questions of myself and then finding curiosities in the world and then following them and trying to understand them and answer them. So I actually don't try to make much sense of how I get from one book to the next. The practical answer is I become very, very curious about something, and if I stick with it and am obsessed with it for a few months, and maybe it will become a magazine article or a series of blogs or something. And if it turns out to be a much larger curiosity or obsession, I'll spend a couple years with it, and it turns out to be a book. It turns out, if you look back at my books, it turns out there's a lot of threads that link them all together. We're talking about almost all of them have to do with the mind. Almost all of them have to do with kind of the relationship between the brain, the physical brain, and the mind, which is of course a more metaphysical thing. And almost all of them have to do with either human history or kind of developing in circumstance. So the kind of the marriage of where the brain is and where the mind is, and how it develops in the whatever the cultural or social context is of the time. But I'm just looking backward there. That's not something that I start with and go, okay, how can I do the next book to fit into that into that milieu.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to look at different connections from one to the next. In fact, your book, The Immortal Game, about chess and the history of chess was quite fascinating to me because I'm very involved in chess and investing. In fact, on this show, we had spoken to Susan Polgar quite a while back about how there are comparisons between chess and investing. And it turned out that a lot of the strategies that chess players employ are also used in the financial planning world. When you were doing your research for the book, did you perhaps see any sort of connections between chess and the business world or investing?
Well, it's easy to see the connections between chess and any complex world. And in fact, that is the number one question when I was writing the chess book was, how compared to any other game or actually any other aspect of culture in any modern civilization, any modern culture, how is chess the only artifact, the only game, the only thing that we have that has actually survived for 1,500 years and across so many different cultures, and which can appeal to a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 95-year-old? What is it about this game? And it turns out that chess is basically kind of this 1,500-year-old PowerPoint tool. It enables us to create metaphors and to understand the world around us. And the reason it does that is that chess is essentially taking a very, very complex world and making it look very simple and allowing us to think in terms of steps and moves and responses. So it's helping us break down a very, very complex world like investing into very, very simple kind of move, then response, then move, then response. So you can look at it in terms of tactics. You can look at it in longer terms in terms of strategy. And you can boil down what turns out to be, infinitely complex, actually, almost infinitely complex on the chessboard, as it is in investing or many other worlds, to just what are you going to do next, and then what are you going to try to figure out, how to do after that. So there's absolutely really interesting connections. And I actually didn't turn out to be a very good chess player, and I'm still not very good, but I do appreciate how I've learned so much about chess's lessons and I'm able to apply it to other aspects of my life.
Mm-hmm. We are talking to David Shenk, who is the award-winning and national best-selling author of 6 books, and his newest book is called The Genius in All of Us. He's been talking to us about the development of thinking and how today we understand the thought process and the development of thought process very differently from how it was understood in the past. So we only have a couple minutes left, but maybe we could get some practical application of this. You've said that perhaps learning is not something that's in our DNA, but rather is something that can be developed. So for parents, what sort of messages would you have to help their children develop?
The number one lesson for parents is to teach their kids. Well, there are really two things. The first thing is make sure kids understand this notion that we've already talked about, which is that intelligence is not a thing that you have a certain amount of. Intelligence or any talent is really a series of skills that you develop or you don't develop along the way. Now, I don't mean to make it sound easy. All skills are very, very difficult to develop, but that's what it is. It's a process, not a thing. The second thing is for parents and to understand and to help their kids understand that when you have a failure, when you reach a limit of your ability in anything, whether it's learning to walk or learning algebra or learning chess or learning history or being out there in the soccer field, the way to respond to that failure is not as some people have hit a limit of their ability and they think to themselves, oh, that's as far as I can go. I don't have that ability. I don't have that giftedness in this realm. I'm not musical, or I'm not athletic, or I'm not math oriented. And they shut down. They think that they've seen the limit of their own abilities. That's not the correct way to understand what failure is. The correct way to understand what failure is actually as a doorway, as an insight into a skill that you haven't yet developed. And that's why when you look at really, truly amazing achievers like Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or Mozart or any of these absolutely astounding achievers, Einstein, what you see are people who, whenever they saw failure, they actually embraced it. In fact, they actually pushed themselves to the limit of their own abilities every day on purpose so that they could see and understand the skills they hadn't yet developed. And although that's not a pleasant process, it's not something that's just merely fun for anyone, even whether you're Michael Jordan or you. Failure it's not a fun feeling, but you do it in order to understand what you haven't yet been able to develop and to learn, and then you focus like a laser on that skill that you can't yet do. So the singular lesson here is that failure is actually not a closed door; it's an open door. It's an opportunity and an insight into where you go and how you get better at stuff.
I think it's a great lesson to teach kids. We have hanging up in our house a quote by Helen Keller that says something to the effect of, many people, when they see a door that's been closed, they just stand there and stare at the closed door instead of seeing how it can be opened and what else they can do. David Shenk, award-winning author and national best-selling author of 6 books, I'd like to thank you very, very much for your time today. Could you just tell us in the last few seconds, how can people follow your work?
Yes, well, thanks for having me. It's been great to talk to you. And it's very easy to go to davidshenk.com. That's DavidShenk.com. And there you will learn more than you ever want to know about me and my work.
Okay, David Shenk, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.